Red vs. Blue is one of my favourite online shows. From a surface perspective, it appears as just a show told in the presentation of an existing franchise, the Halo series. But really, it's so much more. It's filled to the brim with character and fantastic comedy. The parts I always come back to the most are undoubtedly the Blood Gulch Chronicles, the first 5 seasons of the show. What I absolutely love about the show's first collection of seasons is how well it introduced us to the setting and sold it, despite it being an already existing, and to many, a very familiar setting outside of the show. What Rooster Teeth really had to do, I believe, to make the show such a success, was to sell its characters and the setting they lived in. Blood Gulch, an incredibly dull and bland canyon. And not only that, but pull over the audience from an already existing universe into its own unique premise, so to speak. I actually only recently noticed the way they achieve this, with a combination of 2 things: character and their culture. Let's begin with character, with probably one of the most memorable bits of dialogue in the entire series. The very first scene of episode 1. This scene actually does a lot of world building, but by addressing what the audience is thinking going into the show. A concern an audience member with no prior knowledge or experience with the show would have is, how is this story set apart from the game and its existing world? It's a rather make or break moment for the show, and they address it, or rather the characters themselves address it, particularly with this bit of dialogue right here.
Seriously though, why are we out here? As far as I can tell, it's just a box canyon in the middle of nowhere, with no way in or out. The only reason that we set up a red base here is because they have a blue base over there. And the only reason they have a blue base over there is because we have a red base here.
Yeah, that's because we're fighting each other.
No, but I mean, even if we were to pull out today, and they were to come take our base, they would have 2 bases in the middle of a box canyon. Whoop-de-fucking-do.
Immediately, the characters address the biggest concern an audience member may have, and make a joke out of it, pointing out the ironic circumstances and futile reason to make any effort whatsoever. It's a level of self-awareness a comedic machinima needs to set itself apart from its source material. And the great thing is, this is communicated by the characters themselves, being self-aware and interacting just as they would any other day. This brings us to our next aspect, which is the culture, which is of course heavily tied to character, but it's rather how they act in the setting represented. One of the best ways to sell a new world to an audience is through its culture. The habits of the world's inhabitants, how they tend to act on a day-to-day basis. A world-building tool that some of my favourite movies, The Lord of the Rings, do exceptionally well. Through food, the stories the characters tell, the way the different races treat one another. All of these contribute to building a world characters have lived in long before we see them on screen, to make it feel pre-existing and like it's really there. Now, Red vs. Blue builds the setting in this way, through culture, though we have to look at the way it's done. Usually in film and TV, there's a rule called show, don't tell, which means use your medium's strengths to engage the audience in creative ways, opposed to relying on dialogue and exposition. Witnessing something firsthand and making a conclusion based on what we've seen, opposed to what we're told and expected to believe, is more often than not more engaging. Large amounts of exposition is often frowned upon. Now, show, don't tell is a bit hard to do in such a limited filmmaking environment, such as Halo. The filmmakers are limited by the game itself, but Red vs. Blue still works very effectively, ironically with exposition, but not in the traditional sense. Let's take this very next scene as an example, where Tucker and Church spy on the Reds, from which we get this bit of dialogue right here.
Okay, look, they're just standing there and talking, okay? That's all they're doing. That's all they ever do, is just stand there and talk. That's what they were doing last week. That's what they were doing when you asked me 5 minutes ago. So 5 minutes from now, when you ask me, what are they doing, my answer is going to be, they're still just talking, and they're still just standing there.
What are they talking about?
You know what? I fucking hate you.
This bit of dialogue is at its core a bit of exposition, but it doesn't feel like it. Rooster Teeth didn't exactly have many visual tools at their disposal. but they more than made up for it with the dialogue. If this bit of dialogue was presented as, man, the Reds do nothing but stand around and talk, it would be far less interesting and would come off as much more apparent as exposition. But it's made so much more entertaining thanks to the chemistry between the characters and the culture this setting has. This scene does a lot of things, much like the first scene. It firstly sets up part of the culture of the very characters we just saw, the Reds, in the fact that they don't really do anything except stand around and talk, leading us to the conclusion that despite this being a war zone, there isn't much going on, not a lot to do, and certainly little threat of danger. But it also introduces Church and Tucker's characters and their chemistry. Church is easily irritable and Tucker is incredibly bored and doesn't take guilt from annoying Church. Also that they do this very same activity quite a bit with consistent results.
We get any useful information out of the prisoner yet? I figured he was here to steal back Lopez, but he won't give us anything, except a list of crockpot recipes. Would that be useful? Do we have a crockpot? No. Caboose made a trade with that annoying guy from Blue Command. He swapped it for a mystery box. What was in the mystery box? 140 jars of mayonnaise. Well, that's a good trade. Yeah, Devils is a great sunscreen. How did you... Never mind.
If you pay attention when watching the series, you'll notice the characters recall prior events for the sake of comedy, but also for building and sustaining a culture. Just take Griff saying how he just falls asleep amidst the staff meetings, thus missing his delegated responsibility.
Oh, crap. I'm out. Give me some ammunition, Griff.
Me? I don't have any extra. I'm down to 1 bullet.
What? How can that be? You're the one who carries all the extra rounds into battle.
Wait, since when?
Since the last staff meeting?
We actually talk about stuff in those things? I just fall asleep inside my helmet.
Just having these characters discuss these events is probably just as interesting and entertaining as actually seeing them unfold. And we get to see the direct consequences almost instantaneously, which causes the fantastic surrendering scene at the start of Season 2 to unfold. The show doesn't discriminate with these bits of exposition either. Things we have or haven't seen, the characters will still reflect on events to rip on each other. Because all of these things are just ongoings in the world. The characters wouldn't know if the audience have witnessed them or not. A perfect example of this is this interaction right here.
Oh, well, you two would be great friends then. He doesn't have a gun, and you didn't bring any ammo.
Hey, thanks, kiss ass. If I want to take guarding tips from the guy that lost our last prisoner, I'll be sure to ask you.
Oh, man, that is a burn. Dude, you just got burned. Burn, dude. Burn. Oh, shut up. Your armor's pink.
Right here, the characters recall events we're familiar with, just like how they would with events we've only heard about, but haven't witnessed. It makes the exposition about these unseen events seem far less like exposition, but just the characters themselves interacting. Because they recall these events just like how they recall the events we've seen a season ago or 2 episodes ago. It makes it all the more believable because they talk about them in the exact same fashion. They're often not even that vital to the plot, but just sell the characters' interactions as real. All of this is so entertaining and consistently hilarious because it feels believable. The culture and the characters who live out that culture feel like they're just doing what they've always known. It's also why it's so great seeing them be thrown into new, ridiculous environments and circumstances. The audience is familiar with the culture and find it entertaining seeing that same culture continue or develop in drastically new circumstances. It's fantastic watching them still retain that culture and insulting each other every chance they get.